Hello and welcome to our second episode of our second season of the Mystic Chat. In today's episode, we are no one here is surprised, but I forgot the name of it, so I have to look up the episode. So it's called Weaving Magic for the New Year. I actually knew exactly what we were talking about, but when I did the promo, I was thinking, let's have a creative, fun, magical title that I won't remember later. But anyway, my name is Chris. I am a published author and a minister for the Fellowship of the Phoenix. I have been doing magic, witchcraft, and shamanism for almost 30 years. Actually, it'll be 30 years next year, so 29. And I would like to introduce my other co-host, Ruby Rose. Ruby, take it away.
Thank you so much. My name is Ruby Ruse. I am a pagan YouTube artist that focuses on fairy faith spirituality. My YouTube channel is called Fairy Fortunes. And in addition to fairy faith spirituality, I talk a great deal about folklore and fairy themed events. And with that, I will turn it over to our final co host this evening, Luke Babb.
Hey everybody, my name is Luke. I use they, them pronouns. I am a columnist over at The Wild Hunt. I am also a devotional polytheist that works specifically, mostly with the Greek and Norse pantheons. A little bit of a magical jack of all trades. I get in trouble. I try to get out of it. But I don't, in all of my magical work, really do much to do with the Wheel of the Year. So I'm really interested to hear about your traditions around the New Year, Chris.
So, one of the things I love about Luke is we both have similar approaches to heathenism and magic and things like that. So whenever they say things like that, I'm like, I hear you. Let's cause some trouble. Let's see what happens. you know. So the magic of the new year. So I wanted this show to be kind of fun and light and not so heavy. However, if it goes that way, it goes that way, and sometimes it does. But this magic can be fun and things like that. One of the things I was thinking about when I decided about the topic today is that a lot of people in the winter time are like, oh, I don't want to do magic. I'm bored. Or I'm cold. It's dark. Blah 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 blah. And then you have the people who are like, oh, it's a perfect time to do shadow work, which is fine. And you know me, I love the dark shadow stuff. However, it doesn't have to be all about that all the time. So, a few things, in the Lakota tradition and some other tribes that I've worked with, one of the things that we like to do is a purification at this time of year. And in fact, in the Apache and Lakota traditions, whenever it rains, that's the energy giving us a cleansing, both energetically, psychically, things like that. But during the winter, whenever you have a white snowfall, it's even deep. It's even deeper. It's a purification, and part of it is, I think before we get into the work of spring, we have to cleanse, and we really need to cleanse the crap out of the 2020 that's been set in our bones. We need to get that crap out. And there's a few things I enjoy to do about that. And the first and foremost, and here's the thing that sucks though. Normally, I do a sweat. lodge, or if I can't do that, at least go to a steam room. And you'll probably think this is a funny. I'm at the gym. I'm in the steam room, and I'll sing sacred songs in my head to call the spirits in the steam room because I want to purify and things like that. However, during COVID, we can't do that. So I'm kind of struggling with that. So instead, I've been doing energy work, chakra cleansing, aura cleansings. I've been doing like drinking herbal teas, exercising, things like that to do something. But I'm from Texas, and so in Chicago, I don't sweat hardly ever. I never sweat. I'm never that hot, and so I need a good purification of sweat. Luke, what type of purifications or cleansings do you do, if anything?
I mean, so keep in mind about me that like my magical practice is pretty much entirely homegrown. I have done some training under a teacher, but at the end of the day, um, a lot of my practice is very intuitive. So I don't do a lot of cleansing. I'll do it for really specific events if I need to have like a blank slate to work from. And I'll do it for uh like like if I'm prepping for some really intense ritual work, I'll do some cleansing of some sort. But in my own practice, about the closest that I do is like centering and grounding work. Um, I have a concept of the world that's really based on the fact that we are sort of the the adding up of all of our experiences over time, right? And I'm just not interested in giving external external influences that are trying to come at me um the benefit of the doubt. Like, I'm pretty sure I can take it. I've got the wards to take it. I've got the allies to take it, and I am more interested in if I do get kind of gunky, learning the lessons from that and turning that into something useful rather than like trying to keep myself at a sterile room state. So I honestly, Chris, don't do a lot of cleansing. When yeah, unless I'm moving into a new space and trying to like lock it down as mine, or specifically getting prepped for like some intensive spiritual work.
Cool. Ruby, I'm curious, are there any fairy magic things to do when it comes to like purification of the body, your energies, your home, your space? What's that like?
Not really. I mean, when I try to do a lot of folklore research, and from what I can tell you, at least with Western fairy folklore, there aren't really a lot of purification rituals. A lot of times the world of the dead and the world of the fae are connected to each other. The world of the fairy are connected to the realm of the dead. And so in some ways, the process of death is kind of a purification rituals in ways, is that you're transferring energy from one state of being to another state of being. But as far as just baths, I would suppose are probably important. In older times in the Celtic countries, especially, they would leave out water for the fairies to bathe in. But that's really the closest thing that I can think of. I know that in my own practice, I really resonated with Luke when you were saying that you like to let things just come at you and your words take it and you take it and you learn lessons and process through them. I feel like that's more in line with what I'm practicing as fairy faith. And I also am kind of forging my own path. There are a lot of practitioners in the world that practice fairy faith spirituality, but what I'm doing is I'm just kind of listening to the spirits that I encounter and trying to forge ahead from the lessons that they teach me. And in that, with the fairy faith, the fairies that I'm working with is that fairies do not recognize the concepts of good versus evil. So a negative experience is what we would deem, rather, what a human being would deem as a negative experience, to a fairy spirit is simply an experience. And so the whole process is learning from that experience and moving forward from it. So in essence, it's that learning process that is the cleansing process. You're integrating more than than getting rid of it. Because sometimes I think we think of cleansing as getting rid of something.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I would say with cleansing in a fairy context is that you're integrating and embracing. It's about learning who you want to become from these influences that have been that are present in your life.
I think that is a very important thing to say about the transmutation and adjusting. For two things. The first thing is I know a lot of brand new pagans and magical practitioners, and they want everything to be simple and they want it to be quick. And sometimes we have to take our bad experience. I wouldn't say bad because that's a judgment, our challenging experience, rather than say, okay, I'm going to learn from this challenge. I'm not happy about it, but I'm going to become blank. I'll become a stronger person. In fact, part of, I think, if you want to really become more powerful with your spell casting, it's problem solving really helps with spell casting. For example, if you get fired, okay, well, let's design a spell to fix that. If you get sick, okay, well, let's uh, create a healing ceremony to get a better, because challenges are designed to help us grow. So I like to think that because we're magical people, that we have the upper hand that a lot of people don't have. One of the things I think about purification is, like, for example, when we are doing a Lakota ceremony, when we do a smudge or something with the sage, it's not necessarily, oh, you're gross. You have your energy in ceremony. It has nothing to do with that. Um, I think there's some throwback from certain groups. Specifically, I like to blame the Victorian age on everything, because they were like, I'm a magical person, but I'm afraid because I have this deeper rooted Christian background. I'm afraid of the devil. And so they would purify, 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 purify. And then they would do a blessing or a prayer. I'm like, okay, it's really not that serious. But the one thing about the sage that I enjoy, or you can also purify with like tobacco or cedar or whatever. I like it because two things. The the aromatherapy really brings you into a place of consciousness that says, okay, we're doing something sacred. You know, because I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a ceremony exhausted because I just came back from a job or whatever, life, and you have your life problems on your shoulders and they're heavy. And then, at least for me, I smell the herb. I'm like, ceremony, yes, here we go, spirits. I am here. I'm here for it. And other times, I think, I gave a workshop like 2 years go about the appropriate way to do a smudge. And one of the things I talk about is a purifying of thought in your mind. Because when we do certain magical things and prayers, and like for example, if you hold the sacred pipe, the chanupa, whatever you say and think has to come true. So if I say I want a job, bam, the spirits are going to help you. If you say I want to heal, it's going to happen. So you really don't want to go into the ceremony thinking, I hate myself, I hate everything, because your spirits are going to say, okay, sure. It's purifying of thought. You can't be, because we're doing something wrong, but the spirits of the sage are like, I understand you're human. I understand. Let me help you be in tune with the energies to get the things you need. So that's one of the things I really enjoy about it. Um, every morning, because I am a massage therapist and a healer, and I talk to clients and students and all those things all day long. Um, and there's attachments that happen. It's normal. It's normal that when I connect with you guys, I become attached to you energetically. And especially when you have a client, or you have a job where you deal with some unsavory people, and you know what I'm talking about. Um, sometimes their energy gets on your energy. And what I mean by that, if you have a strong aura and you wake up and you say, I feel great and I feel strong, it's not going to hurt you. It just isn't. But after a 12, 13-hour day, and you're like, I don't remember if I ate today or not. I'm so tired. Your energy becomes kind of weaker. So when you do have those um, bursts of energy towards you, it can affect you. How I've noticed for myself, from my massage clients, they're there to release. So they release emotions and energy. And I've noticed, at least for me, it doesn't penetrate into like, oh, it's in my body. But I do a scraping thing. I'll just like scrape it off, and it hasn't penetrated, but I can feel it. I can feel it. I'm like, oh, I don't feel 100%, and I scrape it off, stuff like that. So, that's what I do for purifying things. And sometimes and I think I don't remember. I think I talked about this in a previous show about purifying the home and things like that, like New Year's Eve things, like you open up the windows and doors and let the old year out. So sometimes I'll take my broom and energetically sweep the area or smudge and things like that. And it's funny because my partner Dan is just like, I think the house feels weird. You should smudge. Okay. Sure. Do you guys do anything along those lines? Anything like that? Especially, Luke, I'm wondering, someone told me he a long time ago that heathens have a smudge, but they don't use sage, they use mugwort. Is that true? Because I never tried that.
I mean, I've said on the show before, anytime you say, do heathens do this? The answer is yes, no, never. Only
Always.
sometimes,
Yeah.
only on Thursday, right? Um, so, I mean, so sort of like thinking about all of that and like smoke cleansing, right? Um, because I want to draw a distinction here. I'm using smoke cleansing as sort of an overall thing. Smudging, I understand to be very First Nations American practice that involves a ritual that not only do I not know how to do, I'm not even sure what it is, right? Whereas like smoke cleansing is a practice that is seen in a lot of different places. And I know that it because I did a bunch of research about this at one point. And actually, Ruby, you might know more about this than I do, because one of the words for it that comes from like English Germanic languages is seining.
Oh,
And seining comes specifically from, I believe, Scotland and Ireland. And it was tied to a couple of really specific herbs there, including like juniper. My understanding of smoke cleansing in general is that it does exactly what you said it does, Chris. It changes the smell, it sort of fills the space, and you can burn things that have a good association for you
Mm-hmm.
with like both in terms of smell and in terms of like, what does this mean to me, right? You're replacing whatever's here with something very distinctly other. um and so I actually do love smoke cleansing. It is one of the few things that I will do around the house. I do use mugwort sometimes, but we're in Chicago, so I can say this: mugwort smells like the cheapest weed you've ever encountered.
It does.
Um,
You're not wrong.
it's so like people use mugwort because it has good connotations in a lot of like the more traditional practices. It is also a mild hallucinogen, so people love it for those reasons. I don't because I don't like the smell. I use it sometimes. I use it specifically when trying to do trance work with the Norse. Um, the other and sort of your other question, Chris, about traditions, that actually and sort of how we impact each other, actually made me think of, because there's a really strong water cleansing tradition in the
Mm,
Greeks, in the Hellenics. It's this idea of Cairnips, which has been translated in a bunch of different ways and shows up in a bunch of different ways in modern practice. But essentially, the Olympians specifically, I'm not going to speak to any of the other Greek spirits because I don't know them as well. Some of the Olympians specifically are very deity. They're very deity, and they're not really human interactive. They don't really like the stuff that humanity gets just by being humans. And I mean, like, you eat, you take a shit, you have sex, you do really human things, and this builds up on your body in something that they call miasma, right? So it's considered polite, and for some of the spirits, necessary to sort of clean yourself of that miasma before you interact with them. It's not because it's bad, it's not because it's dirty, it's because it's super duper human and it makes them really uncomfortable, because they are so deity shaped that they don't really interact very well with that. um, so I do a little, like, when I'm doing like a formal petition or like going to visit Olympus itself, I will do a little ritual that is very much not based in tradition. It is very much something that came out of like neo-pagan uh, Hellenism, which is to take a bay leaf, and a bowl of water and some salt, and a piece of silver, right? Um, and then essentially you make the water into salt water, so you've got the sea, right? You put the silver in there because you've also got the land. You take the green thing, you set it on fire, and you drop it into the water.
great thing.
I mean, it can be anything. I use bay leaf. Bay leaves have lots of good connotations, but again, I really do believe that what matters here is your connotation. And frankly, I live in the Midwest. It is very hard to get a lot of the things that grow locally in Greece. Um, so then you just like wash your hands, your face, your head if you really want to be nice. Um, and that's more a question of politeness,
Mhm.
and ease of communication than anything else. Um,
The other thing it does I want people to know about those cleansings because I've heard things like, "Oh, well, I don't want to work with any god who doesn't like me as I am." I get it. However, there are certain Olympian spirits who are fine with it. Uh, uh, Tiana is one of them because she's the huntress. Um, Pan is another, but I wouldn't call him an Olympian.
He's
But
not really.
he's
He's
not.
big, but he's not an Olympian. Dionysus is, uh, I mean, he gets around. He's sort of an Olympian sometimes, but he does not give a fuck.
No, and
He
that's why we like him.
right. He's very much into the like things bodies do. His altar in my house is in the bathroom. Like
The other thing that purification that you talked about, what it does, it also energetically, or in theory, it's supposed to energetically raise your vibration so that when you commune with them, it's easier to talk to them. So is it kind of like, for example, um, it raises your consciousness awareness so that it's easy for you to magically or energetically connect. Yeah.
yeah, I don't usually use the paradigm of vibration, but I do definitely agree that it focuses your mind.
Mhm.
It gives because I did a class a million years ago about how ritual space works. And part of why you can achieve the mental states that are necessary for a ritual is because you have very clear transitions. You have a
Yeah.
very clear, like, I am no longer in the normal world. I am doing a specific thing. I am doing this magical work. Um, and you have like a period of time in which you can make that change. So by the time you get to the other side, your brain is super ready to focus in on exactly what it is. And I think that that also like is going to help you communicate better.
Yeah, agreed. Um, yeah, before we spend too much time on yes, I wanted to talk about setting your magical intention of the new year, stuff like that. I actually don't do that. So, but what
I
I
do.
actually do, what I actually do is that I work with the three Norns, you know, who are different than the three faiths, but I can see how people think they're similar. And so I work with them because in traditional witchcraft, especially the type I do, which has a heathen slant to it, it's like the three Norns are these like overlord beings who are like above and beyond the gods. The reason, and you know this, Luke, is because even the gods are subject to them. You know, so it's this weird kind of energy. Now, uh, there's certain practices that we do and things like that, but um, a lot of people I find are afraid of them, which I think because in traditional witchcraft, if you're into that, there isn't a whole lot you're afraid of. It just you're not, and so we work with them, and we work with them in such a way that I treat them like deity, knowing that they're not deity, meaning I don't have a word or a practice that can do better. So I honor them in such a way that if I would honor a god this way, I honor the horns this way as well until, excuse me, until they tell me otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested because like thinking about this and like I've got some thoughts, but I'm also comparing what you said about people being afraid of them. Because in my understanding, the Norns are the embodiments and harbingers of fate, but they
Mhm.
are not people who do things to you. They just tell you how things are. And I'm sort of reminded, Ruby, of the banshee. Like the banshee's not, in my understanding, killing people. She's just showing up to tell people that they might die. And I'm sort of wondering, like, how do the fairies that people are afraid of, like, how does that measure up for them?
Well, in ancient times, fairies were very much considered entities that you wanted to avoid for the most part, especially in the Celtic regions. And actually, a lot of people think that there aren't indigenous fairy spirits here in America. That's actually inaccurate. There are many First Nation beings that while that is not, they don't say fairy in First Nation languages, but the spirits are very, very similar. And in fact, there's a lot of correlations between the two cultures, is that many spirits are almost like, the descriptions of these beings are nearly identical. So it's really interesting. So, and the reason I bring that up is even in First Nation cultures, the fairy spirits, these spirits are kind of beings that you want to leave alone for the most part. But the stories are also about that they are a part of the culture. It's about embracing, it's like what I was saying earlier, it's about embracing the good and the bad, well, positive and negative, if you will, harsher experiences with more sublime experiences, and treating those as pathways of evolvement and development in your journey. So with the darker spirits, like the banshee, they were very scary, and to some extent, the banshees are thought to be the spirits of ancestors. They're actually family women that come to tell you of the family having a new death. But another spirit that is considered very dark comes from Scotland, and that's called the red cap. And the red cap is almost like a fairy assassin. The reason that they're called red caps is because their caps are red. And the reason for the red color is that they take their hats and they dip it in the blood of their victims. And as I was thinking about this creature and what it meant in a cultural context, in some ways, the red cap kind of signifies things that need to pass away. The acceptance of the negative, the acceptance of death. And in that regard, I would also say that the banshee fits that criteria as well. Is that if we look at it as, if we remove it from being an entity, being it as supernatural experience, and we just look at it in a cultural context, then the spirits represent the harsh realities and the truths that we have to face as we go through life.
Yeah. And I mean, I love what you said about how she's like a passed away female ancestor, because one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about in respect to the Norns is that in the myths, and especially in the sagas, you get a lot of spirits who are maybe one thing and maybe another, and maybe there's sort of a spectrum in between, right? And you get ancestors of the bloodline, especially like female ancestors. Coincidentally, in our theme of the new year, the holiday for these spirits, called the Disir, is actually usually celebrated modernly in between Christmas and New Year's, often New Year's Eve specifically. And you get these female ancestors who are very powerful and can be either good or evil, depending on, I mean, isn't that true of all family? But but they're not necessarily the Norn, but they're not also not the Norn. Like they are also tied up in the fate of the family line. And while we have like the three big named Norn who even the gods answer to, right? We also see figures with those names as Valkyries. We also see um, people use the term Norn to refer to what we might call the Disir. Um, and so I think that there is really something there, like a through line between spirits that are grand and terrible and maybe your great grandmother, um, and are here to sort of like herald the fate of the family. So I'm really interested in that. Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, when I teach about the ancestors and things like that, I talk about an ancestral teacher when you go to the underworld. And a lot of times, in not always, a lot of times it's a female ancestral spirit. To me, it's the same thing. It's a but I have found through my experience that that ancestor spirit doesn't necessarily like design your fate. I think she has an idea of how the family should be. And I think she tries to influence us, but we have to make our own decisions. One of the things I teach is that once you find your ancestral teacher, when you're at a crossroads, like, should I take his job or this job, or should I date this person or this person? I mean, I wish I was so lucky in all my relationships to have all these choices. I don't. I never do. But anyway, you would speak to your ancestral teacher because they would help you plan it out. I'm like, okay, so if you do this, here's what's probably going to happen. If you do this is what's probably going to happen. So I can see how the Norns and the ancestress or similar. That's interesting because I vaguely knew that about the Desir, but I really didn't know a whole lot about it. So I'm kind of enjoying that correlation there. That's really
I have been really lucky and gotten the chance to help edit the second book of the new edition of Our Troth, which is coming out
yeah.
this year.
When? Because I want to buy it.
This year. It's the one that's specifically about spirits and gods. It is, I have it open on another tab on my laptop right now. It is a massive tome. Um, it is so big.
Are they going to release the second volume with all the holidays and
That
celebrations?
will be volume 3.
Volume 3. Well, what's volume 2?
Volume 2 is just the gods. It's just the gods and spirits chapters.
What's
Volume 1 is just the history of heathenry. And
oh,
then
that's good.
volume 3 is going to be actual like holidays, ritual practice, modern traditions in different places.
Wow.
But
Well, I know we're
that's another
digressing.
story and can be told another time.
Talking. We're digressing. Um, um. So okay. So the Norns. Again, I have to. So whenever I do a whenever I read the runes or even the tarot, I I conjure for the Norns by name, and I say, guide my heart, guide my hands, guide my thoughts. And I feel I get a better reading that way. Go to the horse's mouth. you know, but the reason I bring that up and tie that into the magic of the new year is because I, I think there's something powerful about creating your fate, your destiny, your future with these powerful beings. However, if you don't follow the Norns and you don't follow the three fates, how I would look at it is co-creating with the universe or the goddess, or however you see it, because I truly believe with all of my being that a powerful magician, shaman, heathen, witch, sorcerer co-creates with the universe. And I know people are like, well, that sounds so new agey. It's true, because I think you get to a point where you're so connected to the spirits because you work with the gods, you work with the ancestors, you work with the spirits of of nature and the elves and the fairies and all those things, to where you're so in tune to the comings and goings of the energy. It's hard to tell if it's me who's designing this, or is it the universe designing it through me, which I like. I like being in that sync. And I think if we can get there, which is it's a lot easier to do than you think, um, then designing your futures is a lot more manageable and tangible, you know.
I mean, Chris, I've got thoughts about that, but Ruby,
I hear your thoughts about it.
I mean, I'm also really interested because you started out with this idea of like intention setting, just
Mhm.
in general, and especially in the new year. And I'm sort of like, Ruby, as you're building your tradition, um, do you have sort of like proactive, I want my fate to look like this sort of practices that your spirits have been teaching you, or um, how do you think about that?
That's a very interesting question. Because I am they teach me concepts, and these are non-human spirits, so it's like gods I think are relatable. I work with Diana and Persephone, and they speak to me in very clear English.
Mm-hmm.
um, or maybe it's just easier to imagine them, because usually when I'm talking to a god, I imagine going to their temple and having a conversation with a very human-like being. But it's very difficult with fairy spirits. They're not human at all. Like, they look more animalistic a great deal of the time. So they actually, I think, have their own language. And so usually I'll hear some very strange phrase. And for a very long time, I thought I was making it all up. But I started writing these phrases down as best as I could in phonetically. And then months later, I would realize that the same phrase had been repeated, and I would not have known it was the same phrase unless I had gone back to my notes and looked at what I had written before. So the phrase that they gave me for this year is Rawe. And as best as I can translate it, it means desire.
Mm.
And so I'm trying to explore for 2021 what that concept means for me. As a female presenting person who was born in the 1970s and raised in the 1980s, there are a lot of social conditions, I feel, that are placed on female presenting people. And I feel like female presenting people don't necessarily think about their own desires. They often are trained to put other people before themselves. And so it was really hard for me, after figuring out what that phrase meant, is that I was trying, well, what do I desire? And as old as I am, I realized that I don't really have any. That's just not something that I work with. I do a lot of what I often do as a pagan is, it's very much the experience of I've been very fortunate to be a channel for goddesses, where I'll be invited to events specifically to host the goddess, which has been an amazing experience. But that's been kind of where my magic has been mostly, is providing a service, providing a function for other members of the community. And so I've never really, and I do some spell work, but not as much as people would think, because in my opinion, you have to have a strong desire in order to create a coherent spell. So if you don't have a strong desire, there's no reason to do a spell. And so it's interesting that you bring that question up, because that's been something that I've been exploring this year. I think that it probably has a greater purpose, is that maybe that's a direction that I need to do some kind of workshop or a class on that concept of helping female presenting people of my specific, because I think it's getting better. It's very exciting to see the younger Gen Zers with their concepts on gender and how they're interacting in the world today. So it's truly amazing to see so much new opportunity and more equality. I think it's amazing. So, but I do think that people of my age range still need some help breaking past the limitations that society and even ourselves have placed on ourselves. And especially if you have given birth to a child, the mother aspect of that is another, I think, level to that, is that if you've actually had this child come from your body, whether you identify as male or female, that is a very profound experience. And so it's very easy for that child to become your desire. Your own desires, it becomes about the desires of that child that came from your body. And so I think that's something that female presenting persons have a challenge working with. So I went on a complete tangent there, but so
no, that's great. That's awesome.
So, but they do recognize desire. I think in the fairy realm, they have different concepts of gender in the fairy realm. I'm not sure. I would even imagine that perhaps many fairies identify as non-binary. I think that's possible. And they definitely are part of their culture, is that pleasure and desire is not seen as something secondary. It is a primary directive. It is a spiritual practice, following your desires. So if you really want to work the fairy path, if you really want to make that spirituality, you have to figure out what it is that you desire, not what your children desires, not what your significant other desires, not what the community desires, although those are desires that are important. But you as a spiritual person have to know what you desire on an individual level, which is challenging. It's more challenging than you might think.
I think that is a very profound thing, especially for the show, for the subject of the show, because a lot of people don't know what they really want. Like, I can't tell you how many students and clients I've had to say, hey, Chris, how do I find out what I'm supposed to be doing, or what I really want to do? And it's interesting because I'm working towards a third career, sort of. And I realized, though, that in every phase of your life, what you're supposed to be doing, it's okay if it looks different. So what I was supposed to be doing in my 20s looks different than my 30s and looks different in my 40s. And that's okay, because we're evolving and our desires are evolving, because I'm hoping that people are obtaining at least some of their desires, I don't think that we can get everything we want all the time, but I do think that, the universe should throw us a bone once in a while. It's like, oh, hey, you actually can have that job, or whatever. And for me, I find where happiness is am I doing something I love? And it doesn't have to mean, do I have the perfect job? It can mean, like the show, this is something I enjoy doing, or teaching, and that gives me joy and fills up my soul. I think that what people need to do is find out what feeds their soul and do that thing. And it doesn't even have to be a paying thing. It doesn't have to be, oh, I want to be a performer, so I have to get paid doing it. And go, you can, there's all kinds of other avenues for that. So I think that if you're feeding your soul and desires, I think there's something with those two things, you
Well,
know.
and I think that, yeah, I mean, honestly, Ruby, I feel like I showed up today just to hear you say that. It's so
Yeah.
good and it's so
Yeah.
useful, and it's work that I've been doing for a while, and that's really, really difficult. And I think, sort of to your point and to your friend's points, is that like desire is not necessarily about, like, the capitalist structure, right?
Right.
um it's not even necessarily about like expectation or your relationships with others. It is like a internal felt sense. It is often a really scary one. Like, talk about shadow work. Getting in touch with yourself in that sort of way is difficult, scary stuff. And I think, I mean, shoot, I know we are ending here in a couple minutes. I think there are a lot worse things to come away from than uh, setting intentions at the beginning of the year is not necessary. What's necessary is knowing your desire at all.
Right. Agreed. Ag- Agree. That's really powerful, and I can't help but to think that, um, just like Luke said, a lot of people think desire is the car, the wife, the kids, the husband, the house, or whatever, and that's a very American, absolutely. But I think to feed your soul, to feed your spirit, you have to decide, what that is. And I think it's okay to experiment. I think it's okay to try things out. And I also think it's okay to try things out a few times, because if I'm like, I really think I want to be a artist, a painter, and the first time I take a class I suck, I shouldn't quit. I should at least give it a go. But I also should have the freedom to say, I was mistaken. I know it's artistic. I'm just not sure what that looks like. So maybe I'm a sculptor, maybe I'm a dancer, whatever. Part of the process, at least for me, is to find that desire, to have that journey of discovery and research and finding and communicating. It's kind of like, to be honest, this is how I found you guys. Because I mean, just having these, I mean, granted, Luke and I are part of the same, um, a spiritual group, and Ruby and I are part of the same spiritual group too, just at different groups. But beyond that, I found you guys because I had these great, beautiful conversations that just fed my soul. Because I remember with Luke, I think we had coffee for like 3 hours that day, and it was just so fun. And I kept thinking, I was like, oh, but with COVID, I haven't seen you in like a year and however long. But so I think part of the experiment, I guess, is to enjoy the journey. Think of it like the Hobbit, of going off on this journey and finding these these beings, these spirits, these people who help you and guide you, and like
Yes, I will point out that Bilbo hated every minute of The Hobbit.
I
Hated
loved his
every.
cooking of it.
But I'm just saying that like we said, like getting in touch with your desires, like becoming the person that you're going to be for the rest of your life, often involves getting dragged through some muck, having your plates broken,
Yes,
have,
having your
and
place
having
broken. Yes,
and having to leave all of your very nice whiskey behind.
right, and having the
Um,
dwarves eat you out of house and home.
right, right. Um, you will get a head cold. It will be miserable. Um, hopefully, it will be worth it.
Well, as we close, I want to give a big thank you today to Ruby. That was wow,
Oh,
profound.
thank
Thank
you.
you for that
So good.
wisdom. And I want to just say,
Raw way, everyone. Raw way.
About to say my compliments to your friends in whatever way they would receive it.
yeah, that's awesome. And thank you to Luke, of course. It goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Thank you. And so I would also like to thank everybody for attending. I'm so glad you were here today. And I look forward to our next show. So you guys have a good evening, a good morning, or a good day, whatever you're doing. We shall see you soon.